Good evening, everyone. Before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and remember to leave a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. That way, YouTube will make sure you don't miss any updates by showing you stories just like this one every time. Tonight, I'm bringing you 3 deeply disturbing true stories that happened at the beach. Places we go to relax, to escape, to feel free. But sometimes, the ocean holds secrets we were never meant to discover. Now, let's begin. I haven't been to a beach in 7 years. Not since that night at Harrow Point. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound, that slow, deliberate scraping against the rocks. And I remember his face in the lighthouse window, watching me, waiting. This is what happened. I was 22 when this happened, working my first real job as a marine biology intern. Our team was conducting a coastal survey along the Northern California coastline, documenting seal populations and water quality. It was September, and most of the tourist season had ended, leaving the beaches empty and almost haunting in their isolation. Harrow Point wasn't on our official survey list. It was a forgotten stretch of coastline, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through dense pine forests. But our lead researcher, Dr. Brennan, insisted we check it out. There had been reports of unusual seal behavior in the area, and he wanted to investigate before winter storms made the coast inaccessible. We arrived just before sunset. The beach was unlike anything I'd seen before. Black volcanic rocks jutted from the sand like broken teeth, and the water had this strange, oily quality to it, reflecting the dying light in unnatural ways. About a quarter-mile offshore stood an old lighthouse, abandoned according to our maps, perched on a rocky outcrop barely connected to the mainland by a crumbling stone causeway. Dr. Brennan and the others set up equipment near the tidal pools. I volunteered to check the northern section of the beach alone, something I'd regret for the rest of my life. As I walked, the sounds of my team faded behind me. The beach curved sharply, cutting me off from their view. That's when I noticed the smell. Not the typical ocean scent of salt and seaweed, but something else. Something like meat left too long in the sun, mixed with a chemical sweetness that made my stomach turn. I found the source near a cluster of rocks. It was a seal, or what was left of one. But this wasn't the work of sharks or natural predators. The animal had been arranged. Its body was positioned upright against a rock, almost sitting, with stones carefully placed around it in a perfect circle. Someone had carved symbols into the surrounding rocks, crude, angular shapes that looked ancient but fresh, the stone still pale where it had been chipped away. That's when I heard it, a low scraping sound, metal against stone, coming from the direction of the lighthouse. I looked up. In the fading light, I could see a figure in the lighthouse window, not moving, just standing there watching me. My rational mind said it was probably a squatter or a homeless person, but something about the way they stood, perfectly still, made my skin crawl. I pulled out my radio to call Dr. Brennan. Static. I tried again. Nothing but harsh white noise. The scraping sound came again, louder now, and I realized with creeping horror that it was getting closer. I looked toward the causeway connecting the lighthouse to the beach. The figure was no longer in the window. They were crossing the rocks toward me. I should have run back to my team. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I was frozen, watching this thing, move across those wet rocks with impossible ease. They wore what looked like an old lighthouse keeper's uniform, but it was wrong, all wrong. The fabric hung on them like it was wet, and even from a distance, I could see that their movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet with tangled strings. Then they stopped, right at the edge of the causeway, where it met the beach. They just stood there, and I could finally see their face in the dim light. It wasn't a face at all. It was a mask made of shells and dried seaweed, with dark holes where the eyes should be. But I could feel them looking at me. Through me, they raised one arm slowly, pointing directly at me, and opened their mouth. What came out wasn't a voice. It was the sound of drowning, gurgling, choking, like lungs filling with water, but formed into words. You found the offering. You must replace it. I ran. I don't remember making the decision to run. My body just moved, pure survival instinct taking over. I sprinted back along the beach, my boots slipping on wet sand, the sound of that drowning voice echoing behind me, impossibly loud despite the crashing waves. When I reached the others, I was screaming. They said I was incoherent, talking about lighthouse keepers and drowning voices and offerings. Dr. Brennan tried to calm me down, but I grabbed his arm and dragged him back toward the northern section of the beach. The seal's body was gone. The circle of stones was gone. The symbols carved into the rocks were gone. There was nothing but smooth, undisturbed sand. Dr. Brennan looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He suggested dehydration, heat exhaustion, maybe a panic attack. But I knew what I'd seen. I insisted we check the lighthouse. He agreed, probably just to calm me down. We crossed the causeway as a group, all four of us. The lighthouse door was rusted shut, covered in barnacles and salt corrosion. It clearly hadn't been opened in years. We shined our flashlights through the grimy windows. Empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no equipment, nothing. And no sign anyone had been inside for decades. They wanted to leave immediately, but I needed to prove I wasn't crazy. I circled the lighthouse, checking every window, until I found something that made my blood run cold. On the far side, away from the beach, there was another circle of stones. Fresh, and in the center was a photograph, protected by a plastic bag wedged between the rocks. Dr. Brennan pulled it out. It was old, faded, dated 1947. It showed a lighthouse keeper standing in front of this very building, holding up a large fish he'd caught. He was smiling, and he was wearing the exact same uniform I'd seen on the figure. On the back of the photo, in handwriting sold, the ink had turned brown. Thomas Merrick, keeper of Harrow Point, lost to the sea, September 14th, 1947. September 14th. That was yesterday's date. We left immediately. On the drive back, Dr. Brennan finally admitted something. The SEAL behavior we'd been sent to investigate. SEALs had been washing up on Harrow Point for 75 years, always in September, always arranged in circles of stones. The locals called it Merrick's offering. They said he drowned trying to save a fishing boat during a storm, and his body was never recovered. They said he still tends the lighthouse, still tries to guide boats to safety, and they said he's always looking for someone to take his place. That was 7 years ago. I've never been back to Harrow Point, but last week I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph of me, taken from behind, standing on a beach I don't recognize. In the background, barely visible in the corner of the frame, is a lighthouse. I was a competitive swimmer for 12 years. I've swum in oceans, lakes, and rivers around the world. I'm not afraid of water, but I haven't gone deeper than ankle deep in 7 years, not since Redfish Beach, not since I felt something grab my ankle in that rip current and pull me down. Something that looked up at me from the dark water with eyes that weren't human. I need to tell someone what really happened that day. I was 15 years old, and my family had rented a beach house in Redfish Beach, North Carolina for 2 weeks in July. It was supposed to be our last big family vacation before my older brother went to college. The beach wasn't particularly popular. No boardwalk, no restaurants, just a handful of rental properties scattered along 3 miles of coastline. The locals were friendly but distant. They had this way of smiling at tourists that didn't quite reach their eyes, like they knew something we didn't. There were signs posted every few hundred feet. Beware of RIP currents and no swimming past the buoys. I remember thinking it was overkill. I'd been swimming in riptides since I was 12. On the 4th day, I woke up early to swim before the beach got crowded. The ocean was perfect, clear green water, gentle waves, temperature just cool enough to be refreshing. I swam out past the buoys, following a sandbar I could see beneath the surface. The water was only about 8 feet deep, and I could still touch the bottom if I needed to. That's when I noticed the current change. Subtle at first, just a gentle pull toward the south. I trained in riptides before, so I didn't panic. I started swimming parallel to the shore, the way you're supposed to, but the current was stronger than I expected. Much stronger. Within seconds, it felt like a hand had grabbed me and started dragging me sideways through the water. I swam harder, but the current was relentless. I looked toward the beach and felt my first spike of real fear. I was already 200 yards from where I'd started, and I was being pulled farther out with every second. The water beneath me was getting darker, deeper. That's when I felt something brush against my leg. At first, I thought it was seaweed, but it came again, more deliberate this time, like something was swimming around me, circling. I looked down into the water, and that's when I saw it. There was something below me, something big. It was difficult to make out because of the way the light filtered through the water, but I could see a shape, maybe 10 feet down, keeping pace with me as the current pulled me along. I kicked harder, tried to break free from the current, but my legs felt heavy, sluggish. The shape below moved closer. I could make out more details now. It was long, maybe 8 or 9 feet, but the proportions were all wrong. Too narrow in some places, too wide in others. And it was pale, not like a fish or a shark, but pale like something that had been underwater for a very long time. Then it looked up at me. I will never forget this as long as I live. It turned its head, because it definitely had a head, and looked directly at me. The face was humanoid but stretched, distorted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. The eyes were too large, perfectly circular, and completely black. No whites, no iris, just solid black orbs that reflected my own terrified face back at me. It smiled. I'm not being metaphorical. This thing opened its mouth and smiled at me, revealing rows of thin, needle-like teeth that went back farther than they should, farther than its throat should allow. And then it started rising toward me. I panicked completely. I forgot everything I'd learned about riptides, about staying calm, about swimming parallel to shore. I just swam. I swam toward the beach with every ounce of strength I had, my arms and legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. I could feel it below me, matching my speed, staying just out of reach, playing with me. That's when something grabbed my ankle. The grip was strong, impossibly strong, and it yanked me down. I went under, swallowing seawater, my arms flailing uselessly. I looked down through the stinging salt water and saw it clearly for the first time. Its body was human-shaped but wrong. The arms were too long, ending in hands with too many fingers, or maybe they were tentacles. I couldn't tell. Its skin was covered in patches of barnacles and sea growth, like it had been underwater for years. And that face, God, that face was still smiling at me, those black eyes boring into mine. I kicked at it with my free leg, and my foot connected with something soft and slimy. Its grip loosened for just a second, and I used that moment to kick toward the surface with everything I had left. I broke for the water, gasping, coughing, and saw the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. A fishing boat, maybe 50 yards away, heading straight toward me. I screamed and waved my arms. The boat changed course, and within minutes, 2 fishermen had pulled me aboard. I was hysterical, babbling about something in the water, about being pulled down. They wrapped me in a blanket and told me I was lucky. I'd been caught in the big southern rip, the strongest current along this stretch of coast. One of them, an older man with a gray beard, looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You see something down there, kid?" I nodded, unable to speak. He exchanged a look with the other fishermen, then said quietly, "We don't swim past the buoys here. Haven't in 40 years, not since the divers went missing. Some things in the ocean, they don't like us being in their territory, and some things have been down there so long, they're not quite dead and not quite alive anymore." He wouldn't explain further. They brought me back to shore, and my family rushed over, relieved and terrified. I told them I'd been caught in a riptide, leaving out what I'd seen. What would I say? That something that looked like a drowned person pulled me under? But I knew what I'd seen. I knew it was real. 2 nights later, I couldn't sleep. I walked down to the beach around midnight, just to look at the water, to try to make sense of what happened. The ocean was calm, reflecting the moonlight beautifully. That's when I saw them. There were shapes in the water, just beyond the buoys. Dozens of them, standing in the shallows, perfectly still. They were man-shaped but wrong, their proportions distorted, and they were all facing the beach. Facing me. I stood there for what felt like hours, frozen with terror, watching them watch me. Then, as the tide changed, they slowly sank back beneath the water, disappearing one by one, until only ripples remained. We left the next morning. I told my parents I was sick, that I needed to go home. They didn't argue. I think they could see something had changed in me. That was 7 years ago. I haven't swum in the ocean since, but sometimes, late at night, I dream about those black eyes looking up at me from the deep, and in my dreams, I can still feel that grip on my ankle. There's a beach house on Caraway Island that you can rent for $20 a night. $20 for an entire oceanfront property. Nobody tells you why it's so cheap. Nobody tells you about the previous guests. And nobody tells you what walks the beach when the tide goes out. I found out the hard way. I was 26 and desperately broke when I found the listing. I'd just gotten out of a bad relationship and needed to get away, clear my head, figure out my next move. A beach house on a remote island for $20 a night seemed too good to be true, but I was too desperate to care. The listing was sparse. Just a few photos of a small, withered beach house perched on stilts, a description that said, private beach access, no neighbors, perfect for solitary retreat, and a contact number. I called, and a woman with a thick southern accent answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for my call. Caraway Beach House. Yes, it's available. $20 a night, 1 week minimum. No refunds. The no refunds part should have been my first warning. The second should have been how quickly she wanted to finalize everything. Within an hour, I'd sent payment and received directions to the ferry that would take me to Caraway Island. The island wasn't on most maps. It was a thin strip of land about 3 miles long, barely half a mile wide, connected to the mainland only by a twice-daily ferry. Population, 34, according to the faded sign at the ferry dock. The ferry captain, a man in his 60s with sun-damaged skin and sad eyes, looked at me strangely when I mentioned the beach house. "You're staying at the Caraway place?" he asked. "Yeah, got a great deal on it." He was quiet for a moment and said, "Stay inside after sunset, no matter what you hear on the beach." I laughed nervously. Is this some kind of local legend to scare tourists? He didn't laugh back. "No tourists come here anymore. Not since. Just stay inside after sunset." The island was beautiful in a desolate way. White sand beaches, scattered dunes covered in sea grass, and maybe a dozen buildings clustered near the ferry dock. The beach house was on the far end of the island, accessible by a sandy road that wound through the dunes. When I arrived, I understood why the rent was so cheap. The house was old, probably built in the 1950s, with peeling paint and warped boards, but it was clean inside, furnished with basic necessities, and the view was incredible. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the ocean, and a wooden deck wrapped around 3 sides of the house. I spent the first day unpacking, walking the beach, trying to relax. The beach was empty, completely empty. No footprints, no debris, no signs that anyone ever came here. It should have been peaceful, but there was something unsettling about such total isolation. As sunset approached, I remembered the ferry captain's warning. I went inside, locked the doors, and tried to convince myself it was just superstitious nonsense. Around 10 p.m., I heard the first sound. It was coming from the beach. A scraping, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the sand. I turned off the lights and looked out the window. The moon was full, casting silvery light across the beach. And I saw them, footprints, appearing in the sand, moving slowly from the water toward the house. But there was nothing making them, just the prints themselves, dragging across the beach in a deliberate path. I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding. This wasn't possible. But as I watched, the footprints came closer, accompanied by that horrible scraping sound. They reached the wooden steps leading up to the deck, and they started climbing. I heard each step creak as the invisible weight moved up toward the deck. I backed away from the door, grabbing my phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. The footsteps reached the deck. They walked slowly around the house, pausing at each window as if looking in. I followed the sound from inside, pressing myself against the walls, trying to stay out of sight even though somehow I knew, that whatever was out there could see me perfectly well. Then it stopped at the back door, the one I'd forgotten to lock. The doorknob turned slowly. The door opened with a long, drawn-out creak. I ran into the bedroom and locked the door. Through the gap at the bottom, I could see the hallway light was on. I heard wet, heavy footsteps moving through the house, water dripping on the wooden floor, and that smell, the same smell of rotting meat and salt water I'd encountered in my first story. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. For what felt like hours, nothing happened. I sat on the bed, staring at that door, watching the shadow of feet in the gap at the bottom. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Breathing. Heavy, wet, rattling breathing, like lungs filled with seawater. And then a voice. A woman's voice, gargled and distorted but understandable. "Please, let me in. I'm so cold. I've been walking so long, please." Every instinct told me not to respond, not to acknowledge it, but the voice was so plaintive, so desperate, that I almost reached for the doorknob. Then I remembered something my grandmother told me when I was a child. The drowned ones will always beg to come inside, but once you invite them in, they won't leave. I stayed silent. The breathing continued for hours, occasionally punctuated by that pleading voice. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat there, watching the sun slowly rise through the bedroom window. When the first rays of sunlight hit the deck, the breathing stopped. The shadow under the door disappeared. I heard wet footsteps retreating, moving back through the house, down the stairs, across the beach. When I finally got the courage to open the bedroom door, the house was empty, but there was a trail of wet, sandy footprints leading from the back door to my bedroom and back out again, and puddles of seawater that smelled like death. I left immediately. I didn't pack. I just grabbed my keys and drove straight to the ferry dock. The ferry captain saw me coming and nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. "You didn't let it in, did you?" I shook my head. "Good. Last person who stayed there did. They found her 3 days later, sitting on the deck, staring at the ocean. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. Just kept saying she's so cold over and over. She's in facility on the mainland now." I asked him what it was, what walked that beach. He sighed. "In 1952, a woman drowned off that beach. Her name was Margaret Caraway, the family who built the house. She was swept away by a riptide while her husband watched from the deck. They never found her body, but every night since then, when the tide goes out, she walks the beach, looking for her way home, looking for someone to invite her in. What happens if you let her in?" He looked at me with those sad eyes. "She takes your place. You become the one walking the beach. Forever." I never went back to Caraway Island. I've never even driven near the coast where the ferry dock is. But sometimes, on foggy nights, I wake up to the sound of wet footsteps on my apartment balcony, and a woman's voice, faint and distant, begging to come inside from the cold. Those were 3 true stories that happened at the beach. Places that should be safe. Places that should be fun. But sometimes, the ocean keeps things that should have stayed buried. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more true horror. Drop a comment below telling us about your own scary beach experiences, or let us know which story scared you the most. Until next time, stay safe, and maybe think twice before going for that midnight swim.